Here's a good question that we get a fair amount of the time. The question is, why is coaching important in the workplace? And for many, they sort of know, but I do think it would be helpful for us to lay out what that looks like. Hey, it's Scott Beebe with Business on Purpose. Delighted to have you with us. Hey, make sure to go check us out, mybusinessonpurpose.com/healthy. About 6 to 7 minutes, and you will actually get a metric assessment of the health of your business. Two business owners in the past week have both said the same thing. Once we get, and then you fill in the blank of the challenge, once we get this handled or this wrapped up, then we'll be ready for coaching. It sounds like a very fore-thoughtful thing to say, and yet we know deep down it's likely not true. We know that time typically breeds the soil for distraction to set in, for busyness to compound, for the misaligned interruptions to continue unmitigated, and we wake up in 6 months or in 3 months or in 12 months in greater chaos and numbness than we're in right now. A man in his 70s was recently reflecting on life and was asked a thoughtful question. And the question was this: looking back, what do you wish for? His response: a simpler time. Although we tend to look in retrospect with the tinted lenses of simple, easy, and wholesome, a tour of the history books will remind us that the world history is peppered with moments we would rather forget. Complexity is on the increase, for sure. In his research-rich book, Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again, author Johann Hari lays out a couple of elements that I think are interesting. One study that Hari discusses shows that the majority of office workers never get an entire hour uninterrupted on a normal day. Also, he says the average American worker is distracted roughly once every 3 minutes. Business owners are longing to build a team of people that will commit to the same desire and focus that they have given to the business to get it started. Unfortunately, most people live under the presumption that they can multitask. Yeah, we all think that we can multitask. But the reality is far different from that. Hari explains that multitasking was a term actually devoted to technology in the 1960s. And this particular technology meant it was capable of doing more than one task at a time because the scientists were able to install additional processors. I mean, just think of multiple brains inside one body. Well, what was good for technology was never intended to be a description of human capability because humans are essentially incapable of legitimate multitasking. We can chew bubble gum and rub our stomach or walk around and listen to music. But legitimate multitasking, what we think of as multitasking, it doesn't work. Compounding these two basic realities, people are constantly distracted from meaningful work, you have that here, and the work they are doing is so fragmented because of the myth of multitasking, you have that over here. You join those two ingredients together, and that cocktail is ripe for frustration and a fragmented mission. So why is coaching so important in the workplace? I think it begs to ask the broader question, why is coaching important at all? A coach provides, in what we see, at least 5 values that the player themselves or himself cannot provide. First, a coach provides perspective and clarity. In its most simplest concept, the coach brings perspective to the player because the player simply cannot bring perspective to themselves. They're not outside of themselves. The coach is not the player, therefore the coach is able to bring perspective. The coach is living outside the day-to-day of the player. A player is always at her altitude, pitch, speed, angle. A coach can adjust, though, the angles when needed in order to gain a different perspective on the same issue. A good coach is one who simply relays what they see and then converts that information into something that's actionable. This leads to the second tool in a coach's tool belt, and that's the time to game plan. Armed with perspective and unique information, a coach will then go into a deep focused time to game plan what they see, what they think, what they hear, and they contrast that with it. A game plan not only dives deep into what the competitor is planning, but it also navigates all the factors influencing the game or the mission. A good coach, armed with perspective and insight, builds a game plan and then readies themselves for the hardest challenge of all. That leads to our third value. The coach shows up to practice even when the player doesn't want to. An NBA scout I read one time showed the contrast between the preparation-loving Kobe Bryant and his rival on the court, the showtime-loving Allen Iverson, saying this: Iverson loved to play the game when the lights came on. Kobe loved to play the game before the lights came on. The repetition of practice is a direct influencer on the success of the game. The consistency of each game is a mirror of the consistency of practice. Without coaches, practices would be far less frequent and far less effective. Tell me how many teams you know, if the coach doesn't show up, that the players stay around. The fourth value of a coach is in their ability to lend courage. We were almost 7 years into our business, and I knew a change was needed. I was essentially working two full-time jobs in the same business, and my fuel tank was running on reserve. My mastermind group, it's basically a team of coaches, was meeting in Nashville for a long weekend to dig into each other's world and situation. And the verdict from my group of 10 guys was clear, and it was unrelenting. They said this: you must cut your time in half and double your rates, no exceptions. And I thought, you guys are out of your mind. For years, it was true. I was undervaluing my rates and over-delivering on my time in front of people. It really was an unsustainable mix. But I was scared, and my mind was flooded with what-if scenarios. What if that ultimately led to a place of grief and terminal conclusion? You can only imagine where those thoughts go, right? I needed courage, the will to stare fear in the face and methodically walk through it. I did, and I didn't die. In fact, the business didn't die either. It grew because now I had more time to devote to the health and the nurture of our team. A coach, an outside team of advisors, lends courage when we need it. And when all the values of a coach have been installed, the culmination of those efforts requires reflective monitoring. That's the fifth value of a coach. And that monitoring adjusts for overages or underages. Without monitoring, we don't know where we need to make adjustments and modifications. So why is coaching important in the workplace? It's because coaching is important in life, and work is where we will spend a significant portion of our life. Everyone needs a coach because everyone is distracted thinking that later will be the best time, not realizing that later is here right now. In fact, speaking of right now, go take the healthy assessment right now. 5 to 7 minutes, mybusinessonpurpose.com/healthy.